Welcome back to episode 54. After searching for 18 months, I've finally found someone localish who can tune the car for me. There are a few tuners close to where I live, but either they don't know how to tune classic minis or their equipment isn't working. I'm not comfortable venturing too far from home and I need somewhere that's kind of familiar to me. So it's taken quite a while to find the right place for me to take the car. I wanted to make sure the car was roadworthy for the rolling road tune-up, so I gave the car a quick once-over, starting with the tyres. The tyres looked a little bit on the low side, so the first job was to go around the car and give them a quick pump up. I'm not sure what the best pressure is for these tyres and it probably doesn't matter anyway because I can't see my foot pump being very accurate, so I just went on looks and feel. Excuse the pun, but it's surprisingly tiring manually pumping up a set of tyres, even small ones like these. I do have an air compressor, but I just felt I needed the exercise having gained a few pounds in the wrong places these last few months. With all the tyres inflated, I went round with a torque wrench just to make sure nothing was loose. The last thing I wanted was for the wheels to fly off on the rolling road. But this is when I noticed the front tyres looked a little bit on the bald side. I think they were okay legally, but probably for only a few more miles. But compared to the bike there was a huge difference in the tread. I think the tracking was a long way off, so I made a note to get the tracking and tyre sorted before I left. Next little job was just checking the battery was secure and that all the cables were tight on the battery and all was good. Although I did find out later on that the battery was flat, which was my own fault as I'd left the ignition on overnight and I ended up having to put the battery on charge. The water in the radiator looked alright, but I added a tiny bit more just in case. I keep a pre-mix of water and antifreeze handy, so this one was one of the easier jobs to do on the list. The oil levels also seem fine, although it is a bit tricky to see the level properly as the oil is so clear. The fan belt was loose and that needed tightening up. It's a fairly simple job to do now that I've got the quick release grill. It can of course be done without removing the grill, but I found it much easier with the grill removed. I phoned up National Tyres who said they could do the tracking, but on arrival they realised their equipment didn't fit, so that ended up being a wasted journey, and it turned out nobody locally had the equipment to do it either, so I was a little bit stuck. Ideally I wanted the tracking doing before the tune-up, but I guess I was just out of luck. Now I won't bore everyone with the difficulties that I have venturing out, but for me to be able to take the car for a tune-up it's taken quite a lot of planning and organising, and anything that doesn't go to plan can often cause me quite a few difficulties, so I wasn't really looking forward to today. Fortunately it's not a million miles away, and for once the weather was dry. But there were a few tricky bits along the way. Some of the roads that I had to drive down had just been resurfaced and were covered in loose stones, and these AO32 tyres just love to flick those chippings up into the car and you can barely hear yourself think. But I was just trying to stay calm and focus on actually getting there in one piece. It didn't actually take me that long to get there and the place itself wasn't too hard to find. And when I got there I was greeted by a guy I think was called Ken, if memory serves me well. Ken took the car for a quick test drive before he drove it to the workshop, which felt a bit strange because I wasn't used to anyone else driving it, which may seem an odd thing to say, but I could tell straight away by the way he was driving it that he had experience of classic minis. I found out later on that Ken used to race minis back in the day. The building has a real old school feel to it, and I tend to feel more comfortable in new builds where everything is brand new, clean, shiny and digital, but I sort of knew that my car needs an old school mindset, and so far I've not had much luck with any of the modern garages, so I felt I was in the right place. We had a quick chat before he started, and I mentioned to Ken that I wasn't here to try and squeeze maximum power and performance from the engine. I just wanted to leave with a car that worked and drove as it should. You can really chase those figures trying to get every last drop of BHP, but I don't drive my car in a way that would be a benefit to me, so I asked if he could set it up in a way that was conservative, if that was possible of course. Fortunately Ken was able to do the tracking and set this up before starting on the tune-up. It was a long way out, which explained why I had the tyre issues on the front. I'd never actually thought to get the tracking set up properly when we restored the car, but I can see how important it is to get done just by looking at the tyre tread on the front compared to the back tyres. It's kind of an expensive mistake to make really, as now I've prematurely worn the front tyres out and these AO32Rs aren't cheap. The spark plugs were given a bit of a clean as they were quite sooted, which was hardly surprising as both the timing and fuel were in need of adjustment. I asked Ken to check the valve clearances for me. I had done this job previously a few months back, but I thought it was wise to get them checked just in case I'd done something wrong. They weren't actually too bad, certainly acceptable, but a little adjustment was made nonetheless. It was now time for the rolling road. Ken was kind enough to talk me through the equipment and explain what some of the waves meant on the screen. It was almost like watching a Kraftwerk video from the 80s. Before starting the tune-up, the timing was set and the distributor was checked to make sure everything was working as it should. And for once, everything seemed to be going well. The timing I'd set at home was a little out, not a million miles, but it can make all the difference and it was soon put right. From what I could understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems that what's really important is to get the air and fuel ratio correct throughout the entire rev range. Readings were taken from the exhaust gases and could be read on the laptop. There was a gauge on the screen measuring the air and fuel ratio, and from what I could gather, the idea was to get a reading around 12 to 14 I think. Initially the ratio was quite a bit varied due to the profile of the needle in the carburettor. To fix this, the needle was removed and filed to a different profile to change the air to fuel ratio. It did take a few runs to set this up, and I didn't quite see how Ken files the needles, but I'm probably best not knowing so that I don't have an urge to have a go myself. But before long the car sounded like it was running a whole lot better and seemed to rev a lot smoother throughout the rev range. Ken took the car for a test drive. I was invited to come along, but being a nervous passenger I just let Ken take it out on his own and he seemed quite happy with the way the car drove. After settling the bill, it was time to head back home. I had a concern though about the tyres, and Minisport was on the way home, so I decided to stop in and get a price for a new set of tyres. Minisport are aware of the health issues I have, and I have to thank them for the help because when I called in they were pretty much booked up with work for the day, but kindly fitted 4 new tyres for me whilst I waited. This time around though I've opted for the A008s rather than the AO32Rs. So all in all, a very stressful but very productive day, but I couldn't wait to get home. Before the tune-up, the car didn't drive like you'd expect a car to drive like. I was always having to change gears going up the hills, and I was having to accelerate slowly all the time, otherwise the car would start to stutter or hold back. Now it's been tuned up, the car drives so much better. It starts with ease from cold and is a lot smoother to drive whilst you're waiting for the engine to warm up. It accelerates nicely, and I found that I don't need to keep changing gears when I'm going up the hills. It seems to have much better low-end torque, and you can really feel the difference. It drives like I'd expect a car to drive now, but the most important thing is that it feels much safer to drive. I was always concerned about engine damage because of incorrect timing or fueling issues, and that took the fun out of driving it, but with all that sorted it feels so much more fun to drive. The new tyres and tracking have also helped to improve the drivability. The AO32Rs were just a bit too sticky, and I could feel that through the steering and cornering. I much prefer these new tyres. There's still a few mechanical jobs for me to sort out and one or two interior modifications to make, but hopefully whilst I'm sorting those out I can finally get to have fun driving the car.